It was supposed to be a routine cargo transfer. A twin-engine Cessna 404 Titan, registered to Air Blue Logistics, lifted off from Reno Airfield at 21:46 on September 14, 1984. The manifest listed electronics and small parcels, nothing that would have raised suspicion. Yet inside the belly of the aircraft sat $10 million in unmarked bills, packed tightly into olive duffel bags sealed with tape. The money was never meant to fly that night, and yet somehow it did. The pilots were officially listed as Daniel Reeves, a 34-year-old former Air Force pilot with a steady hand and a quiet demeanor, and Thomas "Tommy" Heller, 29, a mechanic from Nevada who spent his weekends drinking cheap beer and losing money at poker tables. They filed a simple flight plan to Salt Lake City, but they never arrived. At 22:51, radar contact was lost somewhere over the Sierra foothills. Locals reported a flash of orange in the sky and a low, echoing boom that rolled through the valleys. The search lasted 9 days, and all they found were scattered fragments of metal, burned insulation, and part of the tail section. No Boethius, no black box, no sign of the cargo. The official report, filed weeks later, stated, weather-related disorientation, probable mechanical failure. The public moved on, but something about the story didn't sit right. The crash seemed too clean, too convenient, and too final for men who had no reason to fly that route in the first place. 5 years later, the file resurfaced in a dusty archive, with a faint coffee stain on the cover and a single handwritten word in blue pen in the margin: parachutes. The last recorded tower communication had been at 9:12 p.m., Flight 84, confirm altitude. Reeves' voice came back calm and professional. Copy, 7,000 and climbing. There was nothing strange about the call until investigators replayed the tape weeks later and heard a second voice in the background. Male, nervous. You sure this thing can handle the weight? That was Heller. Reeves replied, it's just metal and air, Tommy. Relax. The word weight became the key to everything. Air Blue Logistics was a small charter company that carried mail and small freight across Nevada. Its owner, Leonard Brooks, denied any knowledge of cash cargo. We don't carry money. Ever, he told reporters. But 1 week after the crash, Brooks purchased a lakeside cabin in Oregon and disappeared from the business. Later, IRS records revealed a $500,000 deposit into a Cayman account under a false name. Investigators could never link it directly, but everyone suspected. The pattern of the wreckage told another story. The debris was scattered over too wide an area for a single impact, over a mile apart, consistent with mid-air breakup, but the weather that night didn't match that explanation. The recovered fragments included a torn piece of green nylon strap, the kind used for parachute harnesses. Still, the report concluded no evidence of foul play. Unofficially, locals whispered about strange lights over Carson Pass that night, two slow-moving glows drifting downward like flares. A farmer claimed he saw them drop, but no one followed up. 5 days into the search, a duffel bag was found buried in mud near Silver Creek. It was empty, except for shredded packing paper and a tag that read property of Western Reserve Bank. The serial code matched one used for armored transport cash bundles. The report vanished from the archives soon after. Years later, a retired marshal confessed, we were told to stop digging. Orders from above. Newspapers printed small blurbs. Small cargo plane lost over mountains. Officials deny rumors of missing cash. By October, Reeves' wife Anna moved away, never speaking to the press again. Heller's brother, Ray, told a radio host Tommy wasn't stupid. He always said he'd never die broke. In 1989, during a summer brush fire near the old crash site, a volunteer firefighter named Mark Dalton spotted something metallic in a dry creek bed. It was a piece of the fuselage, still with faded blue paint. Next to it, half buried in the dirt, was a rusted cylinder, a parachute release. Inside the dirt nearby, a wallet. The ID inside was worn, but legible, Daniel Reeves. Folded in the wallet was a small, water-stained note that read, we were supposed to take the other route. Don't trust him. T. The sheriff reopened the case for 72 hours, then closed it without explanation. but Dalton had taken a photograph of the wallet before handing it over. That photo resurfaced years later on an early internet crime forum, posted by an anonymous user claiming to be Heller's niece. The caption read, "They found him, but not all of him." Detective Raymond Locke was still young when the crash happened in '84, but something about it stayed with him. He revisited the site after the wallet's discovery. Among the twisted scraps of metal and pine roots, he found a rusted buckle still attached to a strip of canvas. When analyzed, it contained trace human tissue. DNA testing wasn't yet common, but the coroner's note read, "Partial remains male, estimated age 25 to 35. Reeves had been 34, Heller 29, and there had been 2 harnesses. Locke also found fresh tire tracks near the site. Someone else had been there before him. By 1990, Locke had reconstructed a theory no one wanted to hear. Reeves and Heller had planned the perfect Madeira theft. Someone inside the company had tipped them off about the hidden shipment. They flew low, ejected the cargo mid-flight, and jumped with parachutes, leaving the aircraft to crash and burn. But something had gone wrong. One of them didn't survive. The other disappeared. The money, meanwhile, was never found. Then a new clue surfaced. A gas station receipt from July 12, 1989, signed T. Heller, purchased 30 miles from the crash site. The handwriting matched Heller's DMV signature. If authentic, it proved he had been alive 5 years after the crash. The receipt came from a Texaco station off Route 7, but the station owner, George Elton, was found dead just 2 months later in what police labeled a hunting accident. Locke wrote in his notes, "Some coincidences are too neat to ignore." The deeper Locke dug, the stranger the case became. The supposed electronics cargo had actually been part of a federal seizure operation tied to laundering through Nevada casinos. Reeves, with military clearance, had access to the flight manifest. Heller, as a mechanic, had access to the aircraft itself. Their plan, to reroute, fake a crash, and disappear, seemed flawless. But there was a missing player. In 1991, a declassified federal memo mentioned an LB under investigation for currency transfers. It didn't take much to connect that to Leonard Brooks, the Air Blue owner who vanished to Belize. He had motive, means, and connections to the stolen money. Reeves and Heller might have been his fall guys or his partners. Then came the discovery that changed everything. In autumn 1989, a hiker named Martha Callow found a small waterproof case near Silver Creek. Inside was cassette tape. When played, it revealed the sound of rushing wind and 2 men arguing. "We're past the point of return, Danny," one voice said. "Then jump," the other replied. A sudden thud followed, then silence. The tape arrived anonymously at the sheriff's office with a note. "You missed one." The handwriting resembled Reeves' old letters to his wife. The media caught wind, and soon the lost flight was back in headlines. The story spread: 2 pilots, a vanishing plane, and millions in unmarked bills. And for the first time, another name surfaced: Marvin Holt, a local pilot with a history of smuggling runs across the border in the 70s. He disappeared in October 1984, 2 weeks after the crash. Flight logs later revealed that his hangar lights had been on the same night Reeves and Heller took off. It was possible that Holt had been the groundman, the one meant to recover the parachuted cash. But if he vanished, someone else must have picked it up. By the mid-90s, Locke was no longer on the force, but the case still haunted him. "Planes don't vanish," he told a journalist. "People do. The tape, the wallet, the empty duffel bag, they all pointed to a conspiracy more complex than 2 men chasing greed. Someone had erased the trail. Someone powerful enough to rewrite the reports, bury the files, and make witnesses disappear." The last line in Locke's notebook read, "If Heller survived, someone helped him disappear. Find who?" But the truth, buried for years beneath dirt, fire, and silence, was about to crawl back into daylight. Because in 1994, a hunter stumbled upon something that would change everything. A skeletal hand still clutching a piece of nylon cord, attached to a waterproof bag. Inside that bag, 2 stacks of $100 bills, still crisp, still smelling faintly of fuel and smoke. That discovery would open the case again, But that's another part of the story, one that revealed what truly happened when greed, fear, and gravity collided that night in the dark skies over Nevada, and how a single decision to jump from a burning plane turned into the longest unsolved mystery of the decade. If you want to know what they found next, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. When the hunter, a 48-year-old named Carl Myers, reported the discovery in 1994, local authorities dismissed it as remnants of the old crash. But when he insisted the money inside the waterproof bag was real and untouched by time, the FBI reopened the case for the first time in almost a decade. The bills were confirmed genuine, dated 1984, with serial numbers connected to the Western Reserve Bank theft, the very money that had supposedly been destroyed in the crash. Forensic teams swept the site near Silver Creek again, this time using new technology: infrared mapping, metal detectors, ground-penetrating radar. What they found buried beneath a rotted pine trunk was not just a single bag, but a shallow pit lined with plastic. It had once contained far more. Only one corner remained intact, and there were faint impressions where other duffels had lain. The amount recovered was less than $20,000. The rest, it seemed, had been moved long ago. Detective Raymond Locke, now retired but still obsessed, returned as a consultant. He looked older, thinner, with gray streaks running through his beard, but his voice was steady. If the cash was buried there, someone came back to collect it, he said, and whoever did knew the terrain too well to be a stranger. He began interviewing old locals again, piecing together a trail of whispers, faded memories, and missing people. One name kept surfacing in the margins: Marvin Holt, the pilot for hire who had vanished 2 weeks after the crash. In July 1994, Locke tracked down Holt's sister, an aging woman named Caroline Holt living in a small trailer outside Reno. She hadn't spoken to law enforcement since the 80s, but she remembered something strange. "He called me the night before he disappeared," she said. "Said he was going north for a few days. He sounded scared. Said something about a deal gone sideways. I thought it was gambling." When shown photos from the crash site, she hesitated, then pointed to a small metal hook near the nylon strap. "That's his," she said quietly. "He used to fix parachutes for extra cash." If Holt had been on the ground waiting for Reeves and Heller, that would explain why the wreckage was so scattered. They had jumped, perhaps one survived, and Holt had retrieved what he could. But it didn't explain why Holt himself vanished, or where the rest of the money went. In August, a forensic analyst named Dana Fletcher discovered something strange in the recorded tape that had surfaced in 1989. Using noise reduction, she filtered out the wind and static. Beneath Reeves and Heller's voices, she found a third sound, a faint whine of another engine, smaller, distant, running parallel for about 30 seconds before fading. "Another aircraft," she concluded. "Possibly a ground pickup signal." Locke listened to the enhanced tape in silence. "They weren't alone up there," he murmured. "Somebody was waiting below." The breakthrough came when Fletcher cross-referenced flight radar logs from the night of September 14, 1984. A small Piper aircraft registered under Holt's name had taken off from a private strip 30 miles south of the Cessna's last known coordinates, at exactly 2140, and disappeared from radar at 2254, 3 minutes after the explosion in the sky. The logs were signed off by Leonard Brooks, AirBlue's owner. The circle was closing. On October 2, 1994, Locke and a small team visited the remains of Holt's abandoned hangar near Carson Pass. Inside, they found old tools, a rusted fuel drum, and behind a false panel, a wooden crate filled with damp papers, maintenance records, flight manifests, and a small ledger written in Holt's handwriting. One line, dated September 14, 1984, read, "Load confirmed. Split 40/40/20. Night run final." Locke stared at the page, whispering 40/40/20. Reeves, Heller, Holt. He flipped the next page and found a single photograph tucked between receipts. It showed 3 men standing beside a small aircraft, faces turned toward the camera, smiles forced, and eyes wary. The photo was time-stamped September 10, 1984. The third man in the picture wasn't Holt, Reeves, or Heller. It was Leonard Brooks. Within days, Brooks' name was on an Interpol notice. He had been living comfortably in Belize under the alias Lawrence Bates, owning several real estate companies and a private air charter service. When questioned by local authorities, he denied everything, claiming he'd left the U.S. before the crash. But when confronted with the photograph, he went silent for nearly a minute before asking, "How much do you think is still missing?" The FBI couldn't extradite him without new evidence, but Locke knew the truth lay back in Nevada. He focused on the one person who could have survived, the one who might still be hiding, Thomas Heller. In late 1995, a hiker found bones near the Mono Lake Basin, almost 50 miles from the original crash site. They were too clean, too exposed. A silver lighter engraved with the initials TH lay beside them. The bones showed signs of a single gunshot wound to the chest. Ballistics couldn't identify the weapon, but a .38 caliber casing was nearby. It had been fired recently, months before the discovery. Someone had moved the remains to stage them. Whoever did it wanted Heller to stay dead, even if he already was. Locke began piecing together a theory darker than anyone wanted to believe. Heller survived the crash, met Holt on the ground, and together they retrieved the money. But when Brooks found out, he wanted his share. A deal turned violent. Holt disappeared, Heller ran, and Brooks walked away with nearly everything. Still, one question remained. Why hide only part of the cash instead of taking all at once? The answer came from an unlikely place, a small-town bank in Wyoming. In 1996, a teller noticed something odd about a cash deposit from a man calling himself David Hollis. The bills were unusually crisp for their supposed age, and several serial numbers matched those listed in the 1984 investigation. Surveillance footage showed the man was tall, in his 50s, with a limp. Locke saw the still photo and froze. "That's Brooks," he said. "That's him, 15 pounds heavier, but that's him." The FBI finally reopened the case under the code name Operation Skyfall. A task force followed Brooks' money trail through shell companies and offshore accounts. The deeper they dug, the more they realized the missing millions had been laundered for years through private air cargo firms and front businesses across Central America. Yet none of it proved the theft itself, until one final document appeared. In early 1997, a retired clerk cleaning out an old courthouse basement in Nevada stumbled upon a sealed envelope marked evidence, Flight 84. Inside was a single roll of undeveloped 35mm film. When processed, the photos revealed aerial shots from that night, images taken from another aircraft. One frame showed the Cessna midair, one engine on fire, the rear cargo door open, and a dark figure jumping into the void with a parachute. In the next frame, another smaller aircraft circled below, its lights barely visible through the haze. On the last frame, the Cessna exploded. The photographer was never identified, but the images were enough to confirm Locke's theory. The crash had been staged. By 1998, Brooks' empire began collapsing under scrutiny. Journalists exposed connections between AirBlue and illegal transport operations. One of his former associates in Belize confessed on record. He used to brag he killed 2 men and got away with $10 million. Within weeks, Brooks disappeared again, this time for good. His house was found empty, his cars abandoned at the airport. Some believed he fled to South America. Others thought he was dead. But then, in 2002, an unmarked envelope arrived at the Reno Sheriff's Office. Inside was a Polaroid photo showing a man resembling Brooks sitting at a beach cafe, smiling, with a headline from that week's Belize newspaper visible in the background. Written on the back was a single line, "Some of us never land." Detective Locke, now in his 60s, gave one final interview that year. He sat by a window, the sunset reflecting off his glasses, and said, "I don't care about the money anymore. I care about the truth. One man died in that jump. Maybe 2. The one who lived, he'll never sleep easy." Then he paused and added, "The sky always remembers." After his death in 2005, Locke's daughter donated his notes to a true crime archive. Among them was one final entry dated 2003. It contained coordinates, latitude and longitude, pointing to a remote canyon west of Tahoe, and a short phrase, "The rest is here." In 2010, a group of amateur treasure hunters followed the coordinates. What they found was not gold or cash, but the twisted frame of a small Piper aircraft, half buried in sand, with bullet holes in the fuselage. Inside the cockpit were two skeletons, one adult male, one smaller, and beneath the seat a metal box. Inside that box was a rusted revolver and a photograph. Reeves, Heller, and Brooks standing in front of the Cessna, smiling. The back of the photo read, "To New Beginnings." September 14th, 84. DNA confirmed one of the skeletons was Marvin Holt. The other was never identified. The revolver matched the casing found near Heller's supposed remains. The implication was clear. Someone had returned years later to tie up loose ends. The FBI closed the case again, this time officially labeling it unsolved presumed homicide. Over the years, the legend of Flight 84 grew. Locals told stories of hidden treasure, of ghosts in parachutes drifting over the mountains at night. Campers near Silver Creek swore they heard engines overhead when no planes were flying. But among all the myths, one fact remained undisputed. $10 million left the ground that night, and only a few thousand ever resurfaced. In 2019, a documentary crew interviewed Dana Fletcher, the analyst who had enhanced the original tape. She revealed that in 2004, after Locke's death, she had re-examined the audio using digital reconstruction. "There's a third voice near the end," she said softly. After the thud, you can hear a whisper. It says cut the line. Whether it was Reeves, Heller, or someone else, no one could tell. But it suggested sabotage. The jump hadn't gone wrong by accident. It had been planned that way. Today, pieces of the wreckage sit in the Carson County Museum, labeled simply as the Lost Flight. The display includes one of the parachute buckles, the wallet, and a few bills sealed behind glass. Tourists stop, read, and move on, never knowing the full story, that the men behind that heist played a game where everyone lost, except maybe the one who planned it all from the start. Decades later, a declassified FBI memo finally surfaced. It stated, in 1994, the Bureau recovered approximately $19,600 in U.S. currency associated with AirBlue Logistics Flight 84. Evidence suggests an organized operation involving at least 4 individuals, including AirBlue personnel and private contractors. Primary suspect Leonard Brooks remains at large. The case remains one of the most mysterious aerial crimes in American history. The money, if still hidden, would be worth more than $25 million today. Treasure hunters still climb the Sierra foothills with metal detectors, hoping to find a clue. But as one local sheriff once said, you don't find the truth in the dirt up there. It's in the wind. It's still falling. Some say Brooks died in Belize in 2006, buried under a false name. Others claim to have seen him in Costa Rica in 2012, walking with a cane, carrying an old pilot's cap. Maybe it doesn't matter anymore. Maybe the real ending was written the night Reeves and Heller chose greed over loyalty, and one of them cut the line. Still, on quiet nights when the clouds hang low over the mountains, pilots report strange echoes on their radios, faint voices repeating the same phrase again and again. We were supposed to take the other route. The archive closes there, its final entry stamped in red, case unsolved. What remains is the story, a ghost of a plane that never truly landed, a secret carried on the wind, and the reminder that some disappearances are not accidents, but choices. What do you think? Was justice ever truly served? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.